When I was a young lad, my grandmother would scoop me up in her arms, squeeze me in a tight hug, and then nibble on my ear. What used to creep me out a little later became quite endearing. It was kind of her signature move. If she were a lucha libre wrestler, she would be called the ear biter. I mean, she was doing it before Mike Tyson. She continued this antic well into my adult life, and even did it to my children. She did it to all of her grandchildren, and I'm sure we all love her for it.
I am Haddy the creator, and today I'm creating something a little bit different to share with you. This week, my sweet ear-biting grandmother passed away. I love her dearly, and I'm sure she will be missed by many. Instead of being sad and sulking around, I wanted to do something productive and take all this energy and do something for her. I wanted to share some stories of her life and kind of memorialize her while they're still fresh on my mind. I would love for this video to stand as a memorial to her for both my family and for the world, because she's worth it. And maybe even someday my children's children will watch this video and learn more about their great-great-grandmother. My grandmother was a very loving and stubborn and hilarious woman. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to illustrate stories about her, and hopefully I bring some laughs and some smiles. So my earliest memories of my grandmother were driving to her house was always quite an adventure. I remember we'd go over some train tracks and kind of drive through some huge lush valleys out in the middle of South Utah. I remember we would drive through an old ghost town that had sunken into some floodwaters. It always felt like an adventure going down to her house. When we got to her house, she would have these little toilet paper rolls that she had prepared for us, where she would kind of seal off the ends with a piece of paper and a rubber band, and she would fill the centers of them with candy. And we used to take those little candy containers out when we were exploring. We would take off for hours and just explore out in the middle of nowhere, kick over anthills and look for sheep bones and deer bones, adding to the adventurous feeling of her house, collect chicken eggs for her from her chicken coop. My grandparents also had an Atari at their house, and my grandma was the best at Pac-Man. Seriously, she would go on 10-minute runs without getting killed by a ghost. And then when she finally did get killed by a ghost, she would punch the couch and say, "Damn it!" Another notable feature of my grandparents' house that I remember quite vividly is they had this can smasher, and they would often let their grandkids squish their cans for them and drop them into this huge bag. My grandpa drank a lot of soda. Another thing I loved about my grandmother's house is that she made honey butter, and that was brand new to me. I'd never had honey butter together. Who would have thought up the concept of mixing butter and honey together to make an awesome new spread to put on your toast? And now, whenever I see or consume honey butter, I always think of my grandmother. Another thing my grandmother is known for is her quilting. She was a very skilled quilter, and she could pull off just about any type of quilt. Which, if you don't really understand quilting, doesn't mean a whole lot, but in the quilting world there is all kinds of different complexities in quilts, and my grandma could do any of them. One Christmas she gave me a quilt that was a full-size blanket for my bed, and I still have it to this day, and I still sleep with it every single night. I can't say that I was thrilled to receive it as a gift as a youngster, but I can say that it is one of the most cherished things that I own today. When my grandmother married my grandfather, her mother told her that she would be surprised if she stayed married for 6 months because she was so difficult and stubborn to live with. This year, they had been married for 76 years. They would often squabble with each other, and my grandma was always flipping off my grandfather. Even days before my grandmother passed away, she didn't have much of an appetite, and my grandfather would ask her if she wanted some yogurt or a Jell-O, and my grandma would respond by giving him the bird. My grandfather would always just smile. It was more a symbol of endearment to him. He even joked that during her viewing she should have her middle finger sticking up. A few other notable things about my grandmother is she always used Aquanet hairspray. I smell that stuff today and I am instantly reminded of her. She also really loved to play card games, and she was always a very good sport and got excited for people when they had good hands and did good things in the game, even if it was at her own detriment. She also loved to play Yahtzee, and she was one of the loudest to scream Yahtzee whenever she got her Yahtzees. She had a few interesting house rules too. She played with 1s and 2s as wild, so it was pretty easy to get a Yahtzee, which made for a lot of screaming, which meant a lot of laughs. Yahtzee! She worked as a nurse, serving people for over 10 years. She would often bring stories home from the emergency room and share them at dinner time, which kind of made it hard for my mother and siblings to keep their appetite, but it never seemed to bother her. She stopped being a nurse though because she needed knee surgery herself. Throughout my grandmother's life, she survived breast cancer and had numerous surgeries. My grandmother absolutely loved music, and dancing the jitterbug was one of her favorite things to do. But as she aged, her ears were one of the first things to deteriorate, and she got to the point where her music hurt her ears, and she lost the joy of music. With her ears shot, she would often whisper to my grandfather, and by whisper I mean yell. When she did so, she would think that her and her husband were the only ones that could understand what she was saying, but this was often not the case.
I'm sure she offended many people thinking that she was telling her husband a secret, when she was actually yelling it loud enough for everybody to audibly hear in the room. On one such occasion, she saw somebody that she had not seen in many years, and she whispered, in quotation marks, something to the effect of, "Wow, is that so-and-so? They put on a lot of weight. She looks like a cow." Needless to say, this so-and-so didn't stick around much longer. It was like she had two volumes, yelling or silent. Another thing she loved to do was read. I think it's impossible to know the tally of how many books she's read in her lifetime. Innumerable books, including a few trashy romance novels that she tried to pawn off to my wife. No thank you. But as she aged, like her ears, her eyes and her vision slowly faded away, and she got to the point where she could barely even see the words on a page, even with the giant magnifying glass to help. Quilting also became a nuisance to her. Her hands became arthritic and cramped, and working a small needle in and out of fabric became so painful for her that it was no longer enjoyable. My grandmother lived a good life, but with all the joys that she enjoyed during her lifetime fading away, I think she was at peace with death. And as hard as it is to let go and to say goodbye, I think it's for the best. I think she's in another place now, doing the jitterbug to music turned up loud, reading all the books she can. With all of her loved ones from times past, I think she's in a lot less pain and a lot happier and a lot more comfortable. She will be missed, and I love her. This picture of her here is my favorite one because it shows how much she loved me personally and how she supported me. You see, this sweater that she's wearing is one that I designed for the company Beloved Shirts. The fact that she would proudly wear it and even pay for this sweater just amazes me because it's totally not her style. I don't even think she ever owned a cat. She wasn't really a cat person. But the fact that she would wear this for me just shows that she supported me in my artwork and she was proud of me. Let's face it, death sucks. It does. But it's part of life. If any of you are mourning the loss of a loved one, as I am right now, I feel for you. It's not one of life's most enjoyable moments, but it is a necessary part of it. Whether or not you believe in life after death, I do. And that at least brings me some peace and some hope.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something about my grandmother. Hopefully her life brought you a smile or a laugh or a tear. It was a tough one for me to make. She really was a fantastic woman, and I'm sure she's now in a better place. This has been Haddy the Creator, and I will catch you on the next video.